He got out of the Army. He started out helping problematic youth. He's a spokesperson for a couple of organizations that support and give college educations to children of special operations people that have been killed either in combat or in training. So if they're in special operations, these organizations help their kids go to college. Then he kind of, I was reading the bio and it doesn't really say where, but he got into music. And he got into country music. And he's leader of a group called Cornbread. He's been the introduction act for people like Winona, Tracy Adkins, Brad Paisley, I believe, was on the bio. And he has a couple of albums out. Very well-versed in music. And I had an opportunity to talk to him in the back. And just a really, really nice guy. But when I was listening to, all of us talking about, gee, it's tough walking into car dealerships now, and it's a little hard walking in talking to a car dealer, and things are kind of tough. Let me show you how Keni went to work. Tim?
Touching down at target.
It's good to see you. How bad? My leg's broken. My back feels kind of weird. Gotta get you out of here, buddy. Pulling him out. Cover. Wait, Put you down.
C2, we're at the 6-4 crash site, securing perimeter.
Roger that.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm good.
You're locked and loaded. Any skitties come around these corners, you watch our backs.
Hey, where's the rescue squad?
We're it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Keni Thomas.
Thank you. That was a great introduction. Thank you. You know, you never looked at your notes, not once. Good job. Yeah, good job. They all thank you so much. They teach you in show business that you should never take a standing ovation for granted, and that you should end on a good note when that happens. So, good night. Thank you. I love that y'all took the time and put the production together so that you could get a good visual. So it saves me a lot of description. So you now understand what the area looked like and what the story we're going to tell you about. And before I even get started, I want to tell you guys thank you so much for having me and bringing me all the way across the country. I was in Nashville a couple days ago, and I love it out here. It's beautiful, and I love that you guys. I know the folks that found me and brought me back have heard this story before, so this is sort of a referral, which is the good thing about coming back the second time for someone is it means you didn't suck the first time. So I appreciate y'all. And then taking the time out of your day to come in here and sit and listen to these stories. I don't take a second of this for granted. Please know this right from the get-go. Because one, I'll tell you, it's a privilege and it's a blessing. It's a privilege because of the folks that I worked with. I get to tell their story. And I love telling their story. If to anyone who will listen, I will tell the story of those folks because I know that by the grace of God, the only reason I'm still around today is because of those people that were on my left and my right that day, who some of them went and all out to make sure that we all came home. So it's a privilege. I will tell their story, because if I don't tell it, who will? It's a blessing because I love what I do for a living. I love it. I get to do, either I'm playing a guitar or I'm telling a story. And we're helping out people along the way, and I love what I do, so it is a blessing. So please know that I'm very, very thankful to be here. The stories I'm going to tell you, I think that the reason that this particular one works is because military stories, it doesn't matter what time frame you served in, whether it was our grandfathers in World War II, or uncles in Korea, or my dad in Vietnam, or my friends that are over there in Afghanistan and Iraq right now. It's always the same story. It's always about the people on your left and always about the people on your right, because, in fact, we just came back from a USO tour. I was just over there over Christmas for the holidays. And if you sit down in one of the chow halls with those guys in Afghanistan, guys and girls, and you say, hey, what do you do? Where are you from? What's your job? Within 3 minutes, they will tell you about themselves, but they'll start talking about the people that were around them. And they'll say, oh, man, you should have seen what so-and-so did, because I wouldn't have, man, he just did. They always talk about those folks. So the stories are always the same. And I want, first I'm going to pause. How many people here how many veterans do we have? How many served in the military before? Always have some. So thank you for your service. So God bless you. And that really warm welcome, the applause is just as much for y'all, for the uniform that you wore, and the days that you had to put the boots on the ground. But if you know those people that served in the military, look at them when I tell these stories, because they'll start nodding their head and they'll laugh, because they know that the people are the same. It doesn't, the names are different, the uniforms are different, the battlefield may be different, but the guys and now the girls that are out there fighting it, it's the same. It's the same stories. And ours, it's no different. And it was on a Sunday afternoon. What do I hope you get out of this story? You're going to get what you want out of it. I'm not here to do a leadership presentation. I don't have I know we have these great screens, but I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. If I had been in the Air Force, maybe I would have a PowerPoint presentation. They don't let the guys in the Army use the little laser pointer things. It'll hurt someone. But I don't even come in here to pretend to know what y'all do for a living. I know a little bit about what you do, but I don't know how hard you have it. I don't know how tough it is. What I do know is, looking around the room, I can tell you right now, the good thing is you guys are all fairly in leadership positions. Most of you are, yes? So you do understand the importance of leadership. What I hope that you walk out of here hearing this story is, it's never about the position that makes you important. I mean, really, even if you're the only person leading yourself, it's the example you set that matters. It's the example you set for the folks around you. That's what makes a difference. That's what is the difference between success, and mission failure. I'll talk a little bit about planning. I'll talk a little bit about training. And I'll use terms like train as you fight and fight as you train. But most of all, I'm going to talk about leadership. And it's leadership not about the generals and the colonels and the captain. It's leadership of the private, who the only guy he was leading was himself. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And I hope that's what you get out of here, is you realize how important you are as the individual. And I know I'm supposed to be talking about the team, but really, you, the individual, you have to know how important you are, because people are counting on you. People on your left are counting on you. People on your right are counting on you. And if you fall out, what happens? I mean, they've got to pick up your slack. And if you are a person in a leadership position, especially, I don't have to preach to you how important that is, they're looking at you. Whether they tell you or not, they're watching the example that you set. And that's what I hope you get out of this, because the stories I'm going to tell you are just about the folks who really didn't see themselves as these great leaders, but it was the example they set that got us all out of there. So our story, it was a Sunday. Sunday was a day off from training. Weren't even supposed to be working. Wasn't even supposed to be working, and somebody walks out of the airplane hangar, and they said it just like, all right, get it on. And it meant a mission was coming down, time to gear up. So you drop what you're doing, just like a firefighter or a police officer who gets the call, and you hustle in there and you start putting on your uniform, you start getting on your gear, you drop what you're doing. Now the military, as you know, is full of all different walks of life, and they're very squared away individuals, and you know, there's always some pretty odd characters too. So on our day off, I was writing a letter home to my mom. There were some guys who were playing volleyball. There's that one odd individual who, on his day off, sharpens knives. Yeah. Stay away from him, okay? Just because he's in uniform doesn't mean he's safe, all right? So stay away from that guy. But so we're all going in there, and I got to get my men rounded up. And here's what I do as a team leader. My responsibility was simple in the beginning. Just get everybody lined up and make sure they all had their gear. Make sure everybody had a job to do and that they had all the equipment necessary to do the job. Now, at our bunks, we all had our equipment. I just had to double check because it was fairly routine. Just about every other day we got a call, all right, get it on, which meant a mission was coming down. But we didn't know if it was a real mission or not. Sometimes they were false insertions. Sometimes just to fly around the city. It was really just to throw the bad guys off. We never really knew when they yelled out, get it on, if it was going to be real or not. But you always had to take it as if it was the real deal. Because what happens if you start treating routine and you start taking it for granted? There's this big word called complacency. And complacency costs all kinds of issues. It will cost all kinds of issues. And for us, complacency costs lives. So we always do our double checks. And that's why you have these things. They're called standard operating procedures, your SOPs. You have them in place so that nothing gets overlooked. There may be another way to do this, yes. But this is how we would like you to do it, because this way we have proven works. So you go down, you go through all your standard operating procedures, and mine was to double check all the guys. Did the machine gun, did it have all the rounds? Was it bubble wrapped with plastic so dirt wouldn't get in it? Did the medical bag, was it packed the way it was supposed to be? I had packed the medical bag the night before. I knew it was good to go, but I packed it and double checked it just to make sure, because we don't take routine for granted. I'm going down the line. Now, in addition to all of our gear, we carry about 70 pounds of body armor. And then there's all kinds of ordnance, and I had the medical bag, I had my rifle, I had a shotgun that was sawed off, and I Velcroed it to my hip. It's about the only place left on me I had room. And then there was this thing I had called a Law, which is a light anti-tank weapon. It's a little rocket launcher. It's about that. I hated it. Hated carrying it because I weigh 160 pounds. Put 70 pounds on me, and my knees were starting to go. I couldn't sprint. And then they had this rocket launcher that weighed 4.5 pounds. Like, here, you carry this. It was right about when my knees would go. I'm like, hey, Sergeant Watson, why do I got to carry this thing? They don't have any tanks. Because it's better to have and not need, Sergeant Thomas, than to need and not have. And I'm not carrying it, so you will. Right. Sergeant Thomas carries the 4.5 pound rocket launcher. So we're going down the line, and I want to introduce you to my men. As a squad goes in the infantry, a squad is usually 8 to 10 guys, right? So the Rangers have always been a little bit short-handed, and they still are today, and we only have 5 guys in our squad. There was Doug Bourne was the squad leader. I was the team leader. There's usually 2 team leaders, but we didn't have enough guys to warrant having another one, so it was just me and my 3 men. Doug and I were both sergeants. We both had pinned on our stripes on the same day. We were both the same rank, but officially he was the squad leader, and I never fully understood why he outranked me as the squad leader. I remember I was like, Sergeant Watson, how come Doug, Sergeant Bourne, how come he gets to be the squad leader? Well, he's from Texas. Texas, I don't know. Texas is a bigger state, maybe. Doug outranked me because he was from Texas. Now, my men was DeJesus. DeJesus was from the hood. He was from Puerto Rico. He was specialist at Melvin DeJesus had just come back from Ranger School. He had a Ranger tab, so we were kind of gearing him up to be a new leader. And he was one of those guys, he was so, being from the hood, he was so street smart that there was nothing you could ever show him that he hadn't already seen. Everybody knows that guy. And he was, I promise you, he was that one guy that really, the only reason DeJesus was in the military to begin with was because the judge in Puerto Rico gave him the option, right? He's like, you, my friend, can go to jail, or you can go into the military. Which would you prefer? I would take the Army, Your Honor, right? So DeJesus was a guy like you were just glad that we had him on our side, right? And I remember you couldn't show him anything that he hadn't already seen. We were training one day, and it was a Carl Gustav. This is a rocket launcher that can penetrate 6 inches of armored steel. Are there any questions? Yes, DeJesus. Yo, man, in Puerto Rico, everybody had a rocket launcher. Huh? Glad you're on my side. There was Eric Saransky, who was a good, solid kid from the Midwest. I loved having him. He did 2 years of community college, came in the military, felt like he needed to serve for a 3-year enlistment. Loved having him. He was good to go. And then there was David Floyd. Now, I'm from the South. David Floyd was from the South as well. He was from the state of South Kakalaki, Carolina, somewhere, and he was in this little town, and he's what we call in the South a bless your heart. Which means when you see David coming, it's like, man, bless your heart. Floyd, because the beautiful thing about talking to y'all is I can tell just by this audience, I do a lot of stuff with schools, and they don't know who Barney Fife is. But you know who Barney Fife is. David Floyd is Barney Fife. And he was all like, go. And I don't know how, I called him Soup. Soup was a nickname for soup sandwich, and a soup sandwich is as good as a football bat. And he'd come to me, he was all ate up, he was good for nothing. And Floyd, how did you even make it into the Ranger Regiment? Because it's not easy just to get there. You have to go through basic training, you got to get through AIT, you got to go through airborne school, then you got to go through the Ranger Indoctrination Program, then you got to go through the first 3 months of just people yelling at you once you get to the Ranger Regiment because they're just trying to make you quit. They're messing with your headspace. But Floyd, somehow he hung on. But he would never pass any of the tests. He never did anything with flying colors. It was always push, pull, and drag him, and he was such a burden on me as the team leader who was in charge of him. Like, can't I just get rid of him? But you know what? I don't get to pick and choose who I work with sometimes. They're sent to me. And it was my job as a person who leads by example to make sure that he met the standards. There were proficiency tests, there were all kinds of physical fitness tests and training tests, and if he didn't pass them the first time, who's getting yelled at? It wasn't David Floyd, it was Sergeant Thomas. Get in here. Why didn't Floyd pass his physical fitness test? Why didn't Floyd pass his PT? Why didn't he pass his road march? Do push-ups. I did more push-ups for David Floyd. Oh, I was like this for more than I was ever in my entire for anything I ever did. And I was like, can't I just get rid of him? You will retrain. That's what they called it, retraining. So for instance, on Saturday morning, once a quarter, when everybody else has done their 12-mile road march with 50 pounds on their back, and Floyd didn't pass it the first time, who's out there walking it again? David Floyd, Saransky, DeJesus, Thomas, and Doug Bourne are all walking that road march again. It's not fun. It's not easy because Floyd didn't pass it the first time. But push, pull, or drag, we got him across that line. Why? Why did we all have to go? Some of you are like, that's not fair. He was the one who screwed up. Yeah, but you're as good as your weakest link. And that's the bottom line. You set your standards high. Set the standards high and bring the people up to meet the standards. You cannot bring the standards down to meet the median. If you try and grade on a curve and bring everybody down so that everybody feels good about themselves and happier and lower the standards, all that does is give you mediocrity. And nobody wants to be part of something mediocre. We all want to do something great. You've never heard a coach, you've never heard Urban Meyer come on the TV and say, hey, how you doing today, coach? Well, I think the Gators are looking pretty mediocre. No, he says they're going to be great every single time. There is no coach that will tell you his team is mediocre. We all want to be part of something great. Bring the people up to meet the standards. Okay, as I'm going down the line and I'm getting everybody geared up and we're all kind of waiting on Sergeant Watson, and Doug has gone into the briefing and they're getting the mission brief. And they come walking out, and what he has is a 8x10 photograph of the objective, and he throws it down on the ground. He says, all right, everybody huddle around. And the whole platoon gathers around. And he says, it's an aerial photograph of a target building in the middle of Mogadishu. And he says, that's the target building right there. He goes, and this is the corner of the building we're going to rope in at. Any questions? That was it. 10 minutes. I was writing a letter home to my mom on a day off. I was not supposed to be working. That's not fair. They're calling us in to work. Yeah, I know it's not fair. I'm sorry. It's not. You're right. But there it is. What are you going to do? You're going to do what needs to be done. That's what you're going to do. And you're going to put the letter down, and you're going to go in here, and you're going to get your mission. 10 minutes. That's what it took. 10 minutes is less time than it takes most of us to even show up in a meeting nowadays. I had my mission. I had my plan. I knew where I was going, who I was after, how we were going to get there, how we would get back. We had a backup plan to that one, and we were locked and loaded, walking to the helicopters. The rotors were spinning, ready to go. Do not ever mistake that minimal time that's spent in a huddle with being poorly prepared. There's a huge difference, because if you prepare in advance, in other words, if you plan well in advance and you implement tough, realistic training that will cover every type of that plan, every scenario you can, what if this happens? What if that happens? And you try and go down that line, you what if it. And then you implement the training, the realistic training, tough, hard, you can call it what you want. Practice, self-improvement, what you're doing here. This is training. Getting yourself better at what you do, because there is always time to improve. Always time to improve your position and yourself and your leadership skills. But when it comes down to it, the planning and the training are nothing if you don't have leadership. And I mean leadership at every level. Leadership for David Floyd, who the only guy David was leading was himself and that weapon system, but by God, he better do that job right. Because I'm a pretty squared away individual, but I can't do it all myself. I can't carry the gun and work it and do my job as a team leader. I needed David to do his job well. I needed him to lead by example. And you've got to count on him to do it, and you need to hold him to that. You set the standards high and you hold people to it. Plan, and then you train and you train and you train, because when it comes down to it, you're going to be as good as you trained yourself to be. You will be as good as you asked yourself to be, and those around you will be as good as they ask themselves to be, and you push them to a higher standard if you're the person who leads by example. Now I told you we're walking to the helicopters. 10 minutes. By the time I'm sitting in the side of that bird, we're lifting off for the mission. We're heading into downtown Mogadishu. Let me tell you why Task Force Ranger was there. Task Force Ranger was a big group of special operations personnel. It was very unprecedented at the time. It was one company of Rangers, one squadron of Delta Force operators. Delta Force are they're your Pro Bowlers, right? You're the NBA superstars of elite special operations. These guys are all senior non-commissioned officers, just very good, highly trained, and a lot of times the missions that they do are so secret the Army doesn't even acknowledge that they exist. So I didn't just tell you that they exist. And then there was the 160th, which was the helicopter pilots and their crew, and those guys are like your Captain Kirks of Army aviation, as good as it got. In 7 years of working with them, I never even saw them put a landing light on. They work entirely in the dark. They're amazing, amazing crews. They are my heroes, those pilots. And then there was a group of Navy personnel that had tattoos of small sea mammals on their arms. I can't tell you they were there, but they were there. And then there was these Air Force guys that were there, and I never really saw them because they were busy hanging out on the beach in their condominiums that the Air Force flew in for them, hanging out by the pool. Yeah, so nothing against the Air Force. There's this great thing that Air Force has that the Army doesn't, which is called quality of life. You should, if you have a young person who's thinking of enlisting, a lot of times I go to these high schools or colleges and I'll play a couple songs and I'll talk a little bit, and then some kid will come up and be like, I'm thinking of joining the Army and the Rangers. You got any advice? And I'll make sure the recruiter isn't there, and I go, yeah, join the Air Force, dude. Because if the Air Force recruiter had been there when I walked in the office, I probably would have been there too. So anyway, it was a package of highly elite special operators going in to get a guy who was a warlord. His name was Adid. Adid had been attacking the United Nations food shipments. Food meant power in a war-torn, starved nation. When he started killing American troops that were guarding the food shipments, that's when Task Force Ranger was put together to go in and hunt this guy down. In a city that is the size of Atlanta, pinpointing one man to a given target and hoping he's still in the building, confirming he's in the building, and then launching a package of about 150 men on him, hoping that he's still there when you get there. It's a daunting task, and we had been there for 3 months. We hadn't gotten him. We had gotten some of his other guys. We started chipping away at his infrastructure, but we had not gotten a deed, and it takes its toll on morale. And I know you understand this, because when you set a goal, and you set a time frame, and you say, here's where I want to be, and here's what I want to do, Does it ever happen as easy as you want it to happen? Does it ever really get there as quick as you want it to? No, it doesn't. I mean, gosh, you can look, I don't know how difficult y'all had it this year, but I'm sure you had it tough. And I'm sure it hit you hard. And you didn't reach where you wanted to be. It takes its toll on morale. And what happens is the people around you start grumbling. You hear it from down in the middle. And you know what? As a person who leads by example, you have got to stop that right there. Because what that does is it chips away at the foundation. And if you catch one person saying, what's the point? You either get their attitude adjusted quickly or you get rid of them. Because you train them and bring them up to speed. But if their headspace isn't there and they do not believe in what you're doing, you get rid of them. Because they will be that one brick that brings the whole thing down. Morale is an issue that the people who are leading by example have to combat constantly. And what we did was we trained 24/7 because we knew it was coming. I don't know when, I can't tell you how it's going to happen, but I guarantee you the call's coming. And on a day off from training, just like that, the course of my life changes radically. But I was ready because we had the planning, we had the training, and we had the leadership. All right, so let's just, I have no idea what direction I'm facing right now, but let's just say that we're going to pretend this is north, okay? So north, south, east, and west. What happens is the birds are going to come into town from the north. It's a very quick flight out over the ocean and into the city, over the Indian Ocean. It's a 3-minute flight. At 1 minute out, we got a call. Heavy weapons are seen on the site. We knew we were going in to a hot LZ. We knew it was a bad part of town. We knew that they already expected us in country. The militia had tried to fight us before. We knew we were up against bad dudes. And we knew there were people in the building that we wanted. Now, Adid wasn't in that building, but 12 of his people were, and we were going after him. What we did not know is the next morning, we would come out. We lost 18 men. Another one died 2 days later, and 78 were wounded. It was supposed to be an hour raid. It was supposed to be a day off from training. And there it was. When you make it out of something like that, and please, this is just the horse I ride, but combat is not the only thing. But if you make it out of something where other people did not, you will spend the rest of your life thanking those people. Because I know it's by the grace of God and those folks. It's the only reason I'm here. And you also fight a battle, and it lasts for a long time. And it's this odd sense of guilt, really. Why did I make it out of there when others didn't? You know, why, God, did you let me walk away? When there were people who I feel deserved to make it. When there were people who had families who were twice the soldier that I was. Why did I make it and they didn't? And you can let that guilt do two things. It can bury you with anger. And we've all known people like that. Or you can let it motivate you and call you to do something purposeful and harder and higher with your life because you've been given that opportunity. And so I want to pause for just a second before I get into the insertion of the mission. And let's talk about what's going on over there in Afghanistan, Iraq. There is nobody here, everybody here knows somebody, yes? I mean, I doubt seriously there's anybody in this room who doesn't know somebody who's over there who has not served or who will be going again. It's a very difficult situation that they're facing. I have been there 4 years in a row now. The situation in Iraq is changing for the better. It's a completely different place than when I went 4 years ago. Afghanistan is still a very tough outpost where there's fighting all the time. We have asked those folks for 7 years now, which is longer than any volunteer force in the United States military history, to go back and forth, back and forth. And they go from that reality to this reality. And they go back and they go forth and they're asked to go from one to the other. And it's a very difficult transition to make where one day you could be sitting in a chow hall talking to your buddy and he doesn't come back from his patrol and you've got to motor on. You don't have time to not go to work that day. You don't have time to grieve. And then you got to come back here and little things are huge issues. And our folks are being asked to do that. And what it takes on our part is a lot of patience. If you know somebody, and maybe it's a younger person, and they're not, they won't talk about it. because they don't think you'll understand, or they think they're going to be bragging. But you know what? Talk to them anyway. Hey, I know I'm not going to understand what you have to say, but where were you? What'd you do? And you watch. Ask them where they were. Ask them about their team or their unit or what their mission was. And I guarantee you it'll start flowing out. And that's what they need. They just need to talk about it. All right. 1 minute out. The idea is, and that's the beautiful thing about, I had a little bit of extra time to talk about the folks today because you got to see the film. Little birds come in first. They hit the rooftops. Delta operators are sitting on those little birds. That's that little two-man bubble helicopter that looks like Magnum PI, right? And they all jump off the rooftops, and they go in through the windows, and they go in through the doors, and then the Blackhawks come in with the Rangers right behind them. And we put in Rangers at 1, 2, 3, and 4 corners of the building. And then we put a perimeter around the building. As we're coming down the street, helicopters over there, target buildings up there. My job in the door on this side of the aircraft was to identify the target building. And then my job was to kick the rope. Just 2 jobs, that's it. You know what? I'm 50 feet off the air and dirt is kicking up all over. You didn't see that in the movie because it makes for a bad movie if all you're looking at is dirt. And that's all we could see. It was swirling in the aircraft. I could see maybe a telephone pole or a building going by. And if I did see a building, I couldn't, honestly, I don't know how many aerial photographs y'all looked at, but I hadn't looked at all that many in my lifetime, and I could not tell you the difference between the Olympic Hotel and the Home Depot outside of Atlanta. I looked at all looked the same to me. I'm like, man, well, I hope the pilots know where they're going, because I don't know. Maybe the Blackhawk has a special dust buster equipment thing that I don't know about. And I looked through the windshield, and the 2 pilots are talking to each other. And Chief Wood says to Chief Brown, I hear him on the radio go, I can't see squat. Can you? I don't see anything. I'm thinking, oh. But you know what? I've never had to doubt Chief Brown, and I never doubted Chief Wood, because they always put us on the money. 100% and then some. Why'd they do it? We weren't buddies. We weren't pals. We didn't hang out together talking about Christmas and our families and our kids. They didn't, man, I don't want to let Kenny down. They had a job to do. And they volunteered for that job, and they knew people were counting on him. If Chief Brown didn't do his job to his utmost ability and put us on the money, everything went wrong. He was the one piece of the puzzle. The one piece of the puzzle that made everything work, because if he screwed up, that meant that we weren't where we were supposed to be. That meant my squad was outnumbered and outguarded and by ourselves. That meant that corner of the building was not guarded and the guys inside were screwed. Chief Brown was the one piece of the puzzle, and he always put us on the money. Do you know when you walk into the 160th as a brand new pilot, you come in with hundreds and hundreds of flight hours. You're an experienced pilot from other units. They recruit the best pilots from other units, and when you walk in there, they remind you of what your job is. They put a mission statement up, and it's very simple. Put the customer on target. Put the customer on time. And then they give them a margin of error. You know what their margin of error is? 30 seconds. Your entire existence, your family moved to Fort Campbell, Kentucky so that you could put the customer on target on time, give or take 30 seconds. And by God, when 3:30, 15:30 hit my watch, ropes! I saw them flare. And then I saw the building. And I saw the Delta operators go in. I could hear gunfire going off. And yes, it was a hot LZ. It was a little bit worse than what we had seen before. The rope goes out. And the second job I have when I kick the rope, this is a physics thing, so I might lose some of y'all. You have to make sure the bottom of the rope hits the ground. The rope's only 60 feet long. Okay? If the bird happens to be higher than 60 feet, what does that mean when you slide to the end of the rope? Yeah, there's no more rope, right? Ooh, that's bad landing. Make sure the rope hits the ground. I look down, lots of good rope, go. My guys are going out this side, guys are going out that side. You saw the film. You're not hooked in, you're not tied in, you're not rappelling, you're just grabbing it with gloves and you're sliding. With 70 pounds of gear like this, there's this other, see what you can't see in the film is that the rope is never comfortably right here where you go, I feel good. And you go, I think what they did was they took my arm and they designed it 6 inches further. Right? So that you have to actually reach out there and you got to go. And whether you're ready to go or not, there's this thing called gravity, and it's like marriage. It's a commitment, and it pulls you right out of the aircraft whether you're ready to go or not. Make sure you have a hold of the rope. I'm the last man out of my bird, and as I grab for the rope, I look over, and the crew chief is standing there, and Ned Norton is his name, and Ned looks like Darth Vader at this point. He's got this black helmet on, his visor down, right, and it says, no fear, across the front. He put the sticker up, no fear. And he looks at me, and I'm heading out, and he goes, remember, no fear! Screw you. It's easy for Ned to say because he's flying away. No fear. Right? I mean, you could hear gunfire going off, but I hit the ground. I'm like right here to the wall from the building. Right where I had to be. My guys are picking up their positions. You could see the other Rangers on the other corner of the building picking up their positions. Checked all my gear. I was good to go. There were people shooting at us when we went in, but honestly, it really wasn't that bad. And it still sounds funny to me. As many times as I've told this story, it still sounds funny when I say, yeah, people shooting at us, but it wasn't that bad. The reason it wasn't that bad is because they were missing. And that's what you want. Because they weren't shooting at me, and it wasn't that bad. So 35 minutes later, from insertion time, 35 minutes later, the mission's done. We had gone in to go get 12 guys. 12 guys it was. They were all in that building, and all those Delta operators got them. Tied them up, flex cuffed them, brought them out. Trucks that were out in the waiting with Humvees came pulling up. We threw the bad guys in there, and they drive away. We're waiting for our trucks to come get us, and it's time to go home. 35 minutes. I'm already thinking, man, I had some fire come. I returned fire. We're all combat veterans. Good job, guys. I might could go home and qualify for a VA loan. I'm a young veteran. And I'm thinking about heading home already. I'm thinking about finishing the letter. Man, you're never going to believe what happened today. And that's when the first helicopter got shot down. And I say the first one. It went down 5 blocks away from us. The mission has now changed. We needed to take everybody that was at that building, and we're going to move on foot to that crash site and secure the crash site. Because we already knew what would happen to that crew if we did not get there in time. If we got there and the bad guys got to the crew before we did, we already knew that they were doomed. Because an aircraft from another unit had gone down 2 weeks earlier from mechanical failure somewhere in the city, and nobody was there to help them. And every single one of those men went home in pieces. Literally, the coffins were loaded on more ceremoniously than anything to that transport plane and sent home. And we knew, we were like, man, that's not going to happen to our guys. And yet there it was. I can't believe that the 160th just got shot down by a guy with a rocket launcher and flip-flops. How is that possible? And yet there it was. What are you going to do? But we had planned for that. There was a rescue helicopter on the money quick. There were Rangers that were already moving towards that. The rescue helicopter got shot putting in guys. But it limped back to base, and those men made a perimeter and started trying to do triage and medical care on the people who were still alive. Dan Bush, who was a Delta sniper on that crash, was wounded very badly when the bird crashed. And he stepped out. I saw the video. The man stepped outside of the aircraft and held off bad guys until the rescue people got there. We started moving on foot. The mission's changed. Now, just as we get ready to go, this is when I see Floyd. You know how any of y'all have kids and there's like this day that they make this transition where there were one kid one morning and then the next day, like, what happened to you? This is what happened to Floyd. I saw it. There was a guy taking shots at us from the backside, and I couldn't get a bead on him. I didn't know where he was at. Floyd sees him, and Floyd's going, we're fixing to move out. And Floyd's like, hey, Sergeant, he's in the tree. You see him? He's up in the tree. And I'm like, I go, what? Where is he? I don't see him. What? He's in the tree, Sergeant. He's in the tree. And then Sergeant Watson's yelling at Floyd. He's like, Floyd, do you see him? He's like, yeah, Sergeant, he's up in the tree. He's like, do you see him? Yeah, Sergeant. Then why don't you shoot him? And it really was like, bing, like the light bulb went off, and I'm not making light of, but Floyd realized, I enlisted into the Army. I'm a machine gunner in a Ranger regiment. Oh, and he put, I can use this thing. And he put his head down, his helmet even got straighter, and he charged the weapon, and they teach you to fire a machine gun in what's called a 5 to a 7 round burst. So it sounds like this. Bop, 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 bop. Bop, 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 bop. And you do it, you give it a second or two to break so it doesn't burn the barrel up. And he's, Floyd's a little bit excited, and I hear him, he starts going, I'm like, Floyd! And the boy pulls his helmet off, and he stands, I'll never forget, he stands up, and he goes, like a true redneck from South Kakalaki, he goes, did I get him? I don't know if you got him, Floyd, but I'm not kidding you. He got the whole tree. It fell over. Good shot. We got to go. And as we're moving down the line now, we're the last guys in this long line of people. Now Doug, my buddy who's the squad leader from Texas, Doug goes running into the medic, and I see him, he's holding his neck. He's bleeding. He's bleeding bad out of his neck. And he runs into the medic. And about 3 minutes later, Sergeant Watson had followed him in and comes back out, and he goes, Bourne's been hit. He goes, you're in charge. I said, well, what happened to him? Is he okay, Sergeant? He's going to be all right. He says, he's been hit. You're in charge. What happened to him? He said, Sergeant Thomas. He says, look, you're in charge. I didn't want that job. I didn't ask for that responsibility. I didn't want that burden. Well, I don't want to be in charge when Doug got hurt. Perfectly happy being the team leader. I didn't ask for that responsibility. I didn't want it, but there it was. What are you going to do about it? I had trained for it. I knew what to do. Okay. I took Doug's radio and I clipped it on my hip. I took the medical bag and I handed it to Jesus. I said, to Jesus, you're the team leader now, man. Roger, sir, because in Puerto Rico, everybody is a team leader. Glad you're on my side. Saransky, look after Floyd. Floyd, look after Saransky. Follow me. Here we go. And we moved down. Now, when we made the left-hand turn towards the crash, remember, this is 3 blocks to the east and 2 blocks north. The birds crashed up in there. You got to imagine about 130 guys on both sides of the street in pockets of fighting. As we turned the corner, there wasn't much room to push in. And that's when I tell people, well, was it like the movie? I go, well, it was Hollywood at that point. Because there were so many rounds going everywhere because the fight was just getting going. And it was hard to tell where the fire was coming from. It was hard to tell where it was coming out. You could just hear rounds going by in the street. Wow, 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 wow. And you could see tracers going, and whoa. And you became one with the ground, or you just moved pretty quick, and you stayed along the walls, and you did the best you could. And I pushed my guys in about 30 more yards, and it felt to me like training. Train as you fight as you train. Shoot, move, communicate, put your guy here, put your guy there. It was training up until somebody got hit. Because here's what happens when somebody gets hit. When good men start going down around you, you know what to do medically, and you know what to do tactically. What you cannot prepare yourself for is that lump that starts working its way up in your throat. Because the back of your brain is a very powerful thing, and it will supersede everything. Because it will tell you to survive. And it will start yelling and screaming and whispering, and every little devil that you ever have will jump out and say, you don't need to be here. There's good guys going down. You need to get behind a wall. Because it would have been very easy for any one of us to just go and just kind of step out of the fight for a little bit. But we didn't. We had to stay in, because if we stepped out, that meant we left somebody hanging. And that's when you find this big word, and I preach it to the kid. If I spend 20 minutes in a high school, I spend 15 talking about this word. And it's character, because that's when you find it. You cannot find the best of you until you face something that's awful, until you face something that's the worst. Maybe right now what y'all are going through is helping you find some character. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen worse times. But I don't trust anybody's character unless they've gone through something tough. Because you can't find it. Because you have to. Because by its very definition, character keeps you doing the right thing even when everything in you would say, quit, run away, hide, save yourself. But you don't. You step forward. You step forward because the people here are counting on you. The people here on your right, they're counting on you. You can't let them down. And that's when I saw people doing amazing things. And if you ask anybody, I don't care whether it was the beach of Normandy or the mountains of Korea or the jungles of Vietnam, they will tell you it all came down to this. If I die here, I die here, but it's not going to happen to the guys next to me. And that moment came to me, wow. The first man was Earl Fillmore. Earl was a Delta operator. That's the first guy I saw get hit. Earl went down. His team leader, Sergeant Hooten, got to him and yells across the street at me. He goes, hey, Thomas, I got to get a medevac. And I run back to Sergeant Watson, who's got the radio, and I said, Sergeant Watson, I got to get Fillmore medevac. And he goes, man, can we get him out on foot? Because he knew, he had the radio. He knew they weren't bringing in another helicopter. I didn't know they couldn't bring in another helicopter. I didn't know another one had been shot down and crashed in the city. There's 2 Black Hawks down in the middle of Mogadishu. There's 2 other ones with holes in the side. They weren't sending another one in to come get one man. Can we get him out on foot? And I run back and I say, Sergeant Hooten, can we get him out on foot? And he looks at me and he says, very matter-of-factly, no, man, he's dead. Don't worry about it. And it bothers me to this day. I still think about that feeling that I had, which was, I didn't have any feeling. Okay, he's dead. All right, what do we do now? I moved. Okay, he knows what he's doing with his guys. But then I took a look at him. And I do not come in here to preach. I never do. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you've never been a believer and that there's a soul inside of a human being and that it goes someplace else when that body dies, I'm going to tell you you're dead wrong because you've never been there when someone died. I don't know who it was or what it was. He wasn't playing dead like in the movies. He wasn't sleeping. There was nothing. It was about as lifeless as this piece of plastic. It was a suitcase that the soul used to be in. And that's when it hit me. Wow. That's not going to happen to my 3 guys. And that was my whole mission. It was no longer about the crash site. It was no longer about the greater glory, the Ranger Regiment. It was about that's not going to happen to my 3 men. And I turned around and all 3 of them, who should have been looking this way, were all staring back at Earl Fillmore. Because these are young men. Floyd was 20 years old, coming face to face with his mortality. Wow, if that's happened to the super soldier, to the varsity squad, to the Pro Bowler of special operations, what does that mean for me who can't even pass a road march? And I looked at him and I said, hey, you guys need to do what you know is right. Listen to the Jesus, he's your team leader. He's going to, I cannot be here. I got to run up and down the line, take care of each other. And by now, the problem with the Jesus, the challenge here is that the Jesus is so excited, he's speaking Spanglish. And I can speak Spanish, but I can't speak that. And I don't know what he was doing. And he was, and I'm like, wow, if you can understand what the Jesus is saying, then you listen to him. But otherwise, do what you know is right, and we're going to make it out of here. Who? Roger Sarn. And I had to run off to go help somebody. This is the story that I love to tell. And this is the story that I take the time with when if I go to any of the schools, and I say, it's the story of the medic and the machine gunner. The medic's name was Doc Strauss. The machine gunner, his name was Pete Nethery. Pete Nethery had put himself out in the middle of the street because it was a good place to cover all of us. He had been shot in the arm. Remember now, the middle of the street's a dangerous place to be for anyone trying to get to him because rounds are going everywhere. Pow, 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 pow. Nobody thought they could get across the street without getting shot. Doc Strauss was a medic. And if any of you know any medics that served in the military, you understand that they're kind of individuals. They kind of hang out by themselves. They don't really have a whole lot of friends. They're kind of odd. In fact, downright weird sometimes. And I'm going to tell you that Doc Strauss's weirdness came, I'm going to cut him some slack. I think it was because of his unlimited access to all of the medication that made Doc as weird as he was. Because, Doc was never afraid to try things. He was like, I wonder what you do when you mix this with that. But Doc, as weird as he always had his nose in a book. He was always looking at a better way to save somebody's life. He never got complacent. He never settled for, you know what? This is all that the Army's ever asked me to do. I've met the standard. Everything else is overkill. He went above and beyond that because he knew lives were counting on him because someday it was going to happen. And he was only going to be as good as he prepared himself to be. And he knew he was the one piece of the puzzle that made everything work. Because if Doc Strauss did not know a better way to save a life when he needed it, that life would not be saved. And here he was. I don't even know. I'm telling you, if there had been water there, he could have walked on it. God loves medics because nobody knows how he made it across the street. And it almost looked like Doc was just annoyed. He wasn't slow crawling or sprinting. I just saw him kind of move out in the street like this. And he gets over and he's working on Pete, and I take a deep breath and I'm like, and I sprint out and I probably dove like 15 yards. I'm like, Doc, oh, Pete, look at you, man. Let's get him out of the street. And we kind of grab Pete up and we drag him over here to the corner of the building. And when I saw Pete about a year later, I kind of gave him a hard time, like, hey, dude, why did we pick you up and carry you? You were shot in the arm. He was perfectly capable of running, but we always train, when you do training, it was, okay, you're going to be wounded and the 2 of you carry him. So it was like, Pete was wounded and he was waiting to be carried. So that's what we did. We pulled him over to the side of the building. And what had happened was the round had entered his wrist and followed the bone and gone out his shoulder. And so it just it basically disconnected. And it was not the worst of wounds, but it was not a good wound to have. And Pete, he doesn't want to look at it, but Doc's so calm, and he's got IVs going, he's shoving Curlex in there, he's like a duct tape, he's trying to, it's crazy. Doc's working on him. And I'm looking at Pete, like, is it bad? Is it bad? It's pretty gross, Pete. I've never seen anything like that. Holy cow, is his bicep off, Doc? And Doc's like, no, Pete, this is not. He's trying to tell me, shut up. And it's like, my bedside manner needs improvement. And Doc's, it's nothing, Pete. We're going to have this thing fixed up. Here's some morphine. You're going to love this. Psst, you know, and Pete's starting to drift now because, you know, the pain's going away. And he says the strangest thing to me. And I wished I'd had a better answer for him, but he grabs it because I'm going to have to get somebody else behind the gun, and I'm moving away. I'm like, all right, Doc, you got it covered. And Pete grabs me by the leg and says, hey, Sergeant Thomas. I said, yeah, man. He goes, I just want you to know I believe in God. And I went, well, I hope he believes in you. And there goes Doc Strauss. And they're all looking at me like it's my fault for putting Erico out there. And we grab Erico and we pull him. He's cussing at me. She's like, look at my arm, Sergeant. Look at that. Put me out there, man. And so now I got to get behind the gun. Good leader will never do something himself that he will ask his people to do. So I jump out there behind the gun, and I see what we're firing at. It's bad guys behind the wall, just from maybe here to the back of the building. And all they're doing is just kind of popping up with AK-47s and going, bah! And then ducking back down, just throwing a lot of rounds down in that area where they knew the machine gunner was. So I waited for them to pop their head up, and I fired the gun. It's out of rounds. But it's out of rounds. How's it out of rounds? And I look over there, and there's Pete with 9 IVs, and he's got all the rounds in his butt packer. I'm like, Pete, bring me the rounds. You know, it's not going to happen. He's out. And so I had left my rifle with Doc Strauss because I figured he might need it. At this distance, the shotgun I had Velcroed to my hip wasn't doing a bit of good. So I grabbed the grenade, and I pulled the pin. And it's so funny because they teach you in basic training, there's this course, and it's called How to Throw a Grenade. And it lasts the entire day. And it's ridiculously long. I'm like, how hard can this be? Pull a pin and throw the damn thing. You know, it just can't be that hard. And yet, they give you this, then they break it down for you. Look, we've made it very simple for you. It's like, step 1, pull the pin. Step 2, take aim. And they teach you to go. You look like that little plastic army man. It's like, and I said, doggone, that's not exactly what I did. I came from the prone position. I went, and they don't teach you about adrenaline because that makes you become Superman is what happens. And I put that thing further than humanly possible, like 150 yards out. I was like, whoa, boom, sorry about that. And I had one more, so this one I just kind of went, threw it right out there, and I'm pretty sure I hit the dude on the head. Like it bounced off of him and landed on the wall that they were behind and blows outward. So they're still firing, and I'm out of grenades. I'm like, Randy, my buddy is across the street, like, hey, Randy, toss me your grenades. And Randy's going, huh? And it wasn't that Randy didn't want to give up his grenades. It was what he had figured out that I hadn't figured out yet, that tossing grenades at each other, bad idea. High margin of error there. Everybody's yelling at me, and Sergeant Watson's, I can see him, he's going frantic over it. He's going, use the law. I'm like, what? He's like, the law, on your back. I've been carrying a rocket launcher around for 3 months that weighed 4.5 pounds that I hated, and I forgot I had it. And there it was. And I learned, it's better to have and not need, Sergeant Thomas, than to need and not have. But the point with that, had I not had the training, had the resources not been made available, had someone not felt it important to teach me how to fire that weapon system just 2 weeks prior, I would never have been able to use it when I needed to use it. It has directions and instructions on it, but it fires differently. You need to have tough, realistic training. You train as you fight, and you fight as you train. Everybody here has heard, we've all heard stories. And you see them in the news, and it's, generally they call it that story of the ordinary individual. The ordinary individual who does the extraordinary deed. You guys have all heard stories. I'm not here to tell you war stories and my story. You've heard them. You can go down to the Gulf Coast, and you can hear all kinds of stories about people who did incredible things during those storms. Right here on the West Coast, I can tell you stories of friends, and they will tell you about whose houses burnt to the ground and some extraordinary things that their neighbors did for them. Don't think for 1 second that anybody on that day, anybody, Doc Strauss, who saved lives while people were shooting at him, Sergeant Watson, who orchestrated all of us and brought us back throughout that chaos. And I will never forget the video footage. And they showed that clip to you before, and it was part of the movie. Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart. That second helicopter that went down, nobody was there to get to that crash site. Everybody was occupied with our crash site. Ranger cooks and mechanics in the 10th Mountain and Pakistani guys and Malaysian guys were all trying to get to us and trying to get to that crash site. But there wasn't enough time. Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart knew it, and they were in the last helicopter left in the sky, and they volunteered. Hey, put us in, we'll go. We got to go now, we got to go now. Hey, we don't have backup for you. It doesn't matter, we got to go now. There's bad guys moving in. And I tell you the truth, it was 200 people, at least. I saw the video footage coming at them from a reconnaissance aircraft. I saw it a couple days later. And those two men ran on foot and stayed there and methodically held those bad guys off, one by one. Remember, they're Delta operators, they don't miss. That's how many of them they were up against until they ran out of ammunition. And it was when they ran out of ammunition is when they got overrun and killed. And they both died, saving the one pilot who was Mike Durant. And they were both awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. So when I tell you it's a privilege, and I tell you it's an honor to come in here and tell the story, I mean it. I mean it from the bottom of my heart, because if I don't tell it, who will? But don't you think for one second that anybody in that who did extraordinary deeds was an ordinary individual. Nothing ordinary about him. It takes extraordinary people to dedicate themselves day in and day out to a calling or a profession and seek to self-improve and lead by example. That's not an ordinary thing. I promise you. And if you walk out of here, what you remember from this is never, ever sell yourself short and think for one second, you're just an ordinary individual. You're anything but. You are anything but. I don't care what it is you do. You're the one piece of the puzzle that makes anything work. You have been given all kinds of gifts. God, you know, the book of Romans is full of them. The book of Romans is full of like all these, hey, have you been given the gift to teach and teach? Have you been given the gift to lead and lead? Every one of you have gifts to go out there and do. It's not just with your job and your work. You've got a family and community. There's all kinds of things you can go out there and do extraordinary things with the extraordinary gifts you've been given. And I know it's not easy. I know it's not. I don't pretend. I told you from the get-go, I don't pretend to know how difficult you have it. Maybe you have a lot of people work for you, that their families depend on you. Maybe it's just your own. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. But I do know this. Every morning, we would stand up there and recite the Ranger Creed. And the very first stanza of the Ranger Creed said this: recognizing I've volunteered as a ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession. I volunteered fully knowing the hazards. I don't know that it's easy for you. But I can tell you this. I don't know if you guys come in here to this conference once a year and you stand up in the morning and yell the creed. Do you guys have a creed? Like it's recognizing I volunteered for CNA National, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession. I don't know if you have that or not. If you need a creed, I can give you one gladly. This one is on the walls of the Ranger Regiment, and it's on the walls of the Delta compound. It's on the walls of every single special operations unit out there. And it's from the Bible again. It's the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. Isaiah 6:8 reads, and I heard the voice of the Lord saying, who will go for us? Whom shall I send? And I answered, here am I, Lord, send me. Here am I, send me. I'll go. Give me the job. I'll do it. When you raise your right hand, however many years it was ago, and you took this job, thank you for doing something that most of us can't do, nor would we. And it's a need, obviously, that's being fulfilled by you. You're the piece of the puzzle that makes everything work in that world. Thank you for doing that job. It's an honorable, it's a noble profession. But when you step forward, it didn't stop there. Because now you're no longer you. You're part of something else. You are part of a team. Because there's people on your left and there's people on your right counting on you. And it's up to you to seek self-improvement and lead by example, because they count on you every day. They may not tell you. You may never get an accolade or a pat on the back or an award, but I promise you they are watching you and they're looking at the example you set. And you said it. You raised your hand and said, send me, give me the job. It's expected of you. It's expected. You're anything but ordinary. The best lesson I learned was the first the most lasting lesson I ever learned from the Ranger Regiment, and all the places I've been around the world, was on the first day that I walked in there. And the Sergeant Major, a legend of a man, Leon Guerrero. And Leon Guerrero he was from Guam, so he's about that tall, and he talked kind of funny, and he scared me. And he had us in there, and we walked in that first day, and he says, "Congratulations, men, for choosing something that's an honorable and a noble profession, my Ranger buddies." He says, "Remember this, though, because some of you are going to go on and do long, distinguished careers in the Army." He says, "Some of you are going to do your time in the Ranger Regiment. You're going to get out. You're going to go back to the real world." You know that we live in the real world now? That's what we're all going to go back to. And he says this, "Some of you will stay. Some of you will go." He goes, "But wherever it is that you do go, remember this, the world needs." And he says, "Ranger doctors, and Ranger lawyers, and Ranger teachers." And what he meant was the world needs leaders. It's why the Rangers' motto is Rangers lead the way. Your family needs you to lead. Yes, your job and the people around you need you to lead. Your community and your church, and we all know the nation needs great leaders. And I will tell you this, for all those people that we do know that are over there serving right now, I know we can say what we want about the youth today, but I've met them. I've met thousands and thousands of them, shaking hands one after the other, and I tell you we're in good shape. Because at the very least, every one of those individuals knows what it means to be counted on. They have accepted that responsibility. And most of the time, we don't want the responsibility, we don't ask for it, but there it is. What are you going to do about it? And actually, this is a really, really great time. I'm going to stop my preaching, and I'm going to pick up my guitar. And I know, I'm going to plug in, Ken, what you might be thinking. Oh no, someone's going to play music in front of us, and what if he sucks? I don't suck at all. I'm pretty good. But I am completely at home behind a guitar. I'm more at home behind a guitar than I am telling stories. This is what I do. And I've been around the world playing music. We've got songs on the radio. I'll be glad to tell you all about them one day. When you play the Grand Ole Opry and they call your name and you walk out there into the circle, you get about 6 minutes and you get to play 2 songs. So you're going to play that one that's your hit that you're trying to push at radio, and then you're going to play one more. And this is the one that I'll always play. When we do the USO tours, we do these big dynamic shows, and there's cheerleaders and comedians, and they'll say, "Keep it upbeat, keep the people happy," and they will. We do it. And then I'll stop my portion of the show and I'll play this song. The most memorable moments that I get from any of those tours is when we walk into some sort of forward operating base out in remote somewhere on the border of Pakistan and a mountain of Afghanistan, and there's maybe half of what I have right here. And this is all I could carry on the helicopter. And I'll walk in, I'll play them this song. And this is why. Because, a year from now, you're not going to remember what it is that I said to you. You won't remember the words I gave you. And you may not remember the song, but you're going to remember how this whole thing made you feel. And that's what this song's about. It's about doing the right thing when you don't want to. And it's just 3 quick little stories, and it's stories, I can name you every person in this song. And most of the time, we don't want the responsibility. It's hard. The burden of leadership is a hard thing to bear. It's not easy. It's not supposed to be. If it were easy, everybody would be in charge. It's not. It's not easy to lead. It's a burden we don't want to have to always bear, and most of the time it happens when the times are bad. But that's when you see the strength in people. Go ask the people in the Gulf Coast. Go ask our friends here that have lost homes. Go ask my friends in my neighborhood who had tornadoes level their towns in Tennessee. Go ask my buddies who are over there fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq right now. And they will tell you, even when I would rather say, not me, we do it anyway because people are counting on you. That's what this song's about. So just, if it's hard for you to watch somebody playing, just close your eyes. And if you have a second, I'd love to meet you back there. And we have, I always bring music because everybody always asks. And you'll be happy to know that whatever we do sell at these type of events, it goes towards the charity. No one raised their hand that day when they asked for volunteers. He got picked out by default. He was the only daddy there. We know what you're thinking. Choose someone else instead. But this league was built on coaches. He stood right there and said, not me, not me. No way with this job of mine. I can never find the time. Not me, no, not me. But the world becomes a better place when someone stands and leads the way, steps forward when they'd rather say, not me. The judge says you're the oldest, makes you the legal guardian. I'm sorry how you lost your folks, but there's no next of kin. A brother and a sister, she knew how hard it would be. But she softly said, I'll raise them, while the voice inside her screamed, not me, not me. No, I can't believe what's happening. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Not me, not me. But this world becomes a better place when someone stands, leads the way, steps forward when they'd rather say, not me. A young captain at attention, a star pen on his chest. He recalls the battle while the final roll calls are ready. They were the finest soldiers, it was my privilege to lead. They deserve the medals, the men who died. Not me, not me, not me. I just did what I was called to do. You'd do the same if it was you. Not me, Lord knows not me. But this world becomes a better place when someone stands and leads the way, steps forward when they'd rather say, not me. Yeah, yeah, steps forward when they'd rather say, not me. Not me. Not me. There it is. All right, y'all. God bless you. Thank you so much for bringing me in, and good luck. Happy New Year.